welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly. I'm Aaron Porras, your host, and with me today to discuss the latest geopolitical developments, our teacher of political science at Haifa University and Ma'ariv columnist Avihu Sofer, and Colonel in the Reserves Miri Eisen, who was a former media advisor to two prime ministers and served in the IDF intelligence community for over 20 years. Now today we will be discussing the first new settlement in the West Bank in 25 years and the future of asylum seekers in Israel. So to begin, in February of 2017, the Amona outpost was dismantled. It was ruled that it was built atop private Palestinian land, and the 42 families living there had to be evacuated. Well, part of the deal to get them out included building these families a new settlement, which is Avichai. And Avichai just passed one of its latest hurdles in becoming the first new Israeli settlement in the West Bank in 25 years.
פתרון למפוני עמונה, אנחנו קבענו דרכים להקים את היישוב עמיחי, התחלנו לנוע שם ונתקלנו בעיה תקציבית, ואני רוצה להודות לך, שר הפנים, שפתרת את הבעיה של חלוקה תקציבית ממשרדך, ואני רוצה לברך אותך. אנחנו הולכים לקבל החלטת ממשלה בעקבות הפתרון הזה כדי להניע קדימה את הקמת היישוב.
Now, what are the effects of building a new settlement amid all of the controversy and all of the discussions and negotiations that are going on? Colonel Eisen, I want to start with you.
So, first of all, we're making a statement here, which is beyond the reality of building a new settlement. It's the fact that the government of Israel, today in 2017, is willing, openly budgeting a brand new settlement, something that has not been done in the years since we've been negotiating with the Palestinians. The only new portion that we actually built was a new neighborhood in Jerusalem. Everything else that's been done in the years, the expansion within Jerusalem when they started a new neighborhood, Har Choma, that was done in the years of negotiation. But if you think about it, in all of the years that we've been negotiating with the Palestinians, we haven't built new settlements. We've only certainly built up settlements that exist, but not new ones with new names.
Avihu, do you disagree?
Well, I don't disagree, but I think that we have to look at Amona. Let's take a few months back and see the state of the Amona settlement. The people that were evacuated, let's put it this way, from Amona are living in a hostel in Eli, which is a very close settlement to it. These are people with families, with children. They were promised by the Prime Minister and by many other people in the government to find that the solution will be fine for them within a few months. I think we're already 7 or 8 or 9 months since then. Those are families, you know, there's a human point to it as well. Now, talking about evacuating Amona on private lands and all that, the story is not as it was said now. I think that what's happening at the moment is that Avichai is a good solution for people who want to live there. I disagree that Israel needs to stop building. I think we should do it and we should carry on doing it according to the understandings that we have with the Americans. At the moment, since the Americans are not against it, and since it's going quietly and in a normal way, there's no reason to create a mess and a whole big noise out of it. I wouldn't take it as a declaration and Israel has decided to change the status quo and so on.
But
let's take it in a more modest way.
But you have to agree that settlement expansion and construction is atop of the list for, you know, the red line for pretty much every negotiation from every group.
For a start, there's no negotiation at the moment. Let's be honest. There's no negotiation. Okay. Nobody's negotiating with no one. There are talks. Jared Kushner is going forward and backwards. Jason Greenblatt is going forward and backwards. The president saying different things, but there's no negotiations at the moment. There is a logistic defense coordination at the moment. That's what we have with the Palestinians. One word about expansions. The government has decided to expand settlements. It has decided already, but it's not doing it. Netanyahu is very, very careful with what he does. I think he's not trying to put a finger in the eye of no one. But we need to understand that there are needs to the people in Judea and Samaria as well. And the government has decided, by the way, to expand settlements, and it's not doing it. The government has decided to find a solution for the Amona settlers, and it hasn't done it for 7 or 8 months.
So let's talk about, actually, because
I'm going to take a lot of against what Avihu just said, because I feel that what's coming out right now is, There are 50 families, and the state of Israel promised them something. And the most important thing right now is specifically about those families. I'm a mother, I have a family, and I don't think that the statements of the state of Israel are just domestic. I don't think that when you do things in Judea and Samaria that you can act as if it's just about the 50 families who need to have a place. No, that's the way you presented it right now, is that it's about these 50 families, and I'm heartless. I'm looking at it in a way which isn't about that. I find in a way that type of framing, there are no negotiations anyways, it's not going to make a difference anyways. The statements and more importantly, the actions that the state of Israel takes do have implications also on if there will or won't be negotiations.
Is there a negotiation at the moment?
Will there be negotiations right now?
At the moment,
do we want
is
to
there
play
any
the blame
negotiation
game? But this
anywhere?
This isn't about the negotiations, Avihu.
But
this is
negotiating with no one.
This is about
Before Avichai, we're not negotiating with anyone.
Government decisions in Judea and Samaria. It is not about building another neighborhood in Harish. It isn't even about building another neighborhood in Jerusalem, which is in much broader consensus. No. This is about a new community in Judea and Samaria, as stated, the first in 25 years. It's not just another event.
I could agree with what Mary is saying if we were negotiating at the moment with the Palestinians, and this would be a cradle or something that would disturb the negotiation. We're not negotiating with anyone. We're only coordinating on a defense level with the Palestinians. We and them are coordinating our actions. That's all. It's not that Avichai changed the status quo.
But I'd have to assume that the intention is not to prevent future negotiations. But on a side note, moving on.
But there's nothing at the moment.
Moving on to a different kind of note, from a security standpoint, what does it entail to now have to get our security forces to protect another settlement, and B, couldn't Israel have created a settlement within Israel proper? Why in the West Bank? Why in Judea and Samaria?
No, this isn't about creating another town in Israel proper. This has to do with a very ideological, important movement, which is a very prominent part of the Israeli government right now.
A right-wing government.
Said that, right-wing government. Having said that, it's not about the majority of Israelis. 95% of Israelis do not live in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. And so let's put it into perspective. We're building up cities up north and down south, but we don't talk about that on these shows. We only talk about the West Bank. Right. To me, the security aspect is not the center point, but it goes both ways. There are lots of communities within the West Bank that have expanded within what we call the settlement block. Those also need to be protected. When we think about it, an empty hill where you build a new community to surround it both by a fence or by security forces, it doesn't make any difference from lots of communities that were illegally done such a way without the approval of the government over the years in Judea and Samaria, so that's not an issue. But the main issue in that sense is, what are we looking at long term? Is this about filling up both areas C and otherwise within the government right now, very clearly together hand in hand with a new community, with a new settlement being built there, are the voices that state clearly, and let's make the status of Area C clear-cut status and apply Israeli law to them, something that we've never done in the past.
And this is not going to make it even
And this doesn't make a
closer.
difference, but after 25 years, for the first time, to establish a settlement is making a statement.
Miri, I think
and when you do so, it makes a difference.
If we look at the politics situation in Israel, you know that Netanyahu, at the moment, in the past few years, has been keeping a very careful moves that otherwise right-wing parties in Israel try to push him to different directions.
Isn't it?
And I think he has been behaving maybe is not the right way, but he has been handling the situation in a very balanced way. I think the Palestinians cannot say that somebody is trying to disturb the situation. And so, Netanyahu is very calm, he's very careful, he makes very, very slow moves. Not to mention the fact that until a few months ago, we had a president in the White House which was against all those things. But even now, when when President Trump is there, nobody's, at the beginning, people came out and say, let's build, let's do this. At the moment, the Israeli government is putting one step ahead and doing very
disagreeing
slow,
strongly with you, Avihu.
We can disagree, it's okay. But we're doing very slow steps, and we're not doing anything against the Americans' policy. We're doing everything in coordinations with the Americans, and with all the respect, I don't think the Palestinians care at all about this Avichai settlement. I think maybe the left-wing people in Israel care about it more than the Palestinians.
I think that what you said right now is incredibly patronizing.
Why patronizing?
Because it's patronizing, and that's not I don't see any Palestinians sitting here. You don't even know where I come from. I'm standing right now, or sitting in that sense. No, because this is about the idea that this is about domestic policies in Israel, that it doesn't impact anybody else. Everything we do in Judea and Samaria impacts other people. We can talk, you and me, forever, that this is about domestic politics, it's about the people inside Israel, but this is affecting additional aspects. That what we're doing there only has to do with U.S. government. And I'm like, you know, at the end of the day, when because we're not negotiating right now, if we would be negotiating, we're not negotiating with the United States of America. We're negotiating with the leaders of the people there. They don't want to negotiate with us right now. That's not what I'm arguing with you about.
But they do not want to negotiate with us with no connection to this
building this settlement is a domestic issue. It's really small. It's about the United States at the most, and it doesn't really matter. And I completely disagree with you on A, B, C, and D.
That's okay.
All right, well, unfortunately, we have to move on to our next topic. So, for our next topic, at the exact same cabinet meeting, Netanyahu began by addressing the growing number of asylum seekers, refugees, and illegal immigrants in Israel. He spoke about how he traveled to South Tel Aviv to speak with residents and retold stories of Israelis living in a third world condition, surrounded by infiltrators who, had it not been for the border fence in the south, would have destroyed Israel's Jewish and democratic character. Here you go.
החלטתי להקים צוות שרים מיוחד, שנקים אותו היום בישיבת הממשלה. הוא ייפגש כבר השבוע, יחד עם נציגים של התושבים, לא רק מתל אביב, אלא גם משכונות אחרות ומאזורים אחרים. אנחנו ניפגש אחת לכמה שבועות בחודשים הראשונים, כדי להניע פתרונות מעשיים לבעיה הזו. המטרה העיקרית היא להחזיר את השכונות הללו לתושבים ולהרחיק ממדינת ישראל, כפי שכבר הרחקנו כ-20,000 מסתננים בלתי חוקיים שמקומם לא כאן.
All right, now Netanyahu went on to quote some numbers. He said that had it not been for certain actions taken years ago and stopping infiltration into Israel, that we would have,
the wall.
which is
correct.
which is true, that we would be host to well over 100,000 refugees, and it would destroy the character of Israel. Do you agree with the statement or not?
Yeah, of course. It's. I don't have to destroy the character of Israel. You know, let's put things in proportions. But what's happening in South Tel Aviv is unbearable. I don't know if you visited it.
I live in South Tel Aviv, actually.
Where do you live?
I live right near the old train station.
And what do you think about it?
I love the area, actually.
No, the area. But what do you think of the atmosphere of infiltrators and the Africans and the Eritreans and the
Well, I don't want to get
Sudanese?
into my personal beliefs.
Let's leave you personally. I will tell you from my experience.
From my personal experience, I've met a lot of people who are working and living their day-to-day lives, and it doesn't look to me like any sort of corporate terrorism or
okay. So I will tell you other stories. I live in
like
Petah Tikva, not in South Tel Aviv. Okay, and there are certain areas at the moment where the Africans live, and I let's put it in a simple way: a young woman cannot cross those streets at night. As simple as that. You can say whatever you want about it, because there has been rapes there, there has been mugs there, and all different things. I think that what happened here is that Israel, in a very, I don't want to say stupid, but somebody did not handle the situation properly, and we created a situation where we have today more than 40,000 infiltrators that are living in South Tel Aviv. Today we have a wall that is stopping them from getting into Israel. But what do we do with those people who live in Israel? They are not refugees. I disagree with the statement that there are refugees. Most of them came here in order to work and send money to their families. And that's what they do. They work here and they send money to their families.
No.
The issue is that all of them are living in South Tel Aviv. There's no reason why they would be here. They came into Israel illegally. They came before the wall. Now, we have enough problems in Israel that we need to deal with them. I agree with those that are refugees. Now, Netanyahu, in his last visit in Africa, signed an agreement with 2 African countries to receive those infiltrators. They just disagree to receive them if they're forced to come out of Israel. So they need to agree to come out of Israel. There's no reason why they would be here. There's no reason why we should pay for the education of their children.
I think that's very hard.
Avihu, I'd like to invite you into the 21st century to a state that is a member of the OECD, because that's where I live. I don't know where you live. I want to introduce you to Spain and to Italy and to France and to Germany, to England, to Scandinavia, and to every other member country of the OECD. That we, like them, are getting an infiltration of people who want to better their life. We got 40,000. I was in Italy this summer. Just this summer, Italy got 90,000. Oh, Italy's bigger. Each one is different. Welcome to the problems of being a first world country of the OECD, where you have not only Africans, but in this case, from Africa, you can walk here. You have people who are absolutely trying to better their situation. Now the question is, what do you do?
They came into Israel illegally.
They go into Italy illegally. They go into Spain. They go into all of Europe illegally.
So?
You're talking about it as if we invented this problem. It's unique to South Tel Aviv because you've never been to these neighborhoods in Paris or in Barcelona or in any other city throughout Europe.
No, I see
It's
what's
the
happening
exact
with the
same
immigrants, with the
everywhere.
Muslim immigrants
and let's turn it
in
now
Europe.
into Islam, because now it's about Muslims, and it's not just about that. People actually move to places because they want to have better lives. We built a security barrier on the border between Israel and Egypt that is 9 meters high. There are now 40,000 here. In another 2 weeks, it's going to be Erev Rosh Hashanah in Israel. They'll give us the exact numbers. I looked up before. Right now, we are 8.7 million Israelis. We can't handle 40,000 people. We don't know what to do in a problem where I don't want the Prime Minister to go to Africa. I want him to go and to talk to the leaders of every single country in Europe and to see, what do you do when you have illegal economic migrants? Because they're working. You know why they're working? Because they're doing jobs that Israelis aren't willing to do. It's 40,000. Why are we so threatened by these 40,000 people?
Why do we have to receive people that immigrated into Israel
Any
illegally?
country in the world.
They are not
Oh my
refugees.
gosh, Avihu,
They are
listen
not
to
refugees,
yourself.
so
So
they
the
can
United
go back to their
States.
home countries. That's all.
Let's talk
As simple
about
as that.
30% of every
What do
country
they do to
worldwide.
Israelis that immigrant illegally to Australia, and the immigration authorities catch them? They send them back to Israel.
You're
As
talking
simple as
in
that.
terms that I think are irrelevant to the
Why?
21st
Miri,
century.
I will give you an example. I was in
heard
Australia,
you clearly.
and beside me there were friends that immigrated to Australia illegally. When the immigration authorities caught them, they sent them back to their home country,
I'd
to
like to raise-
Israel.
I'd like
As
to
simple
raise
as
a
that.
point.
That's what they do in the US
Hold
as
on.
well.
I'd like to raise a few points. I'd like to raise a few points. The first is that in the cases of a refugee or somebody seeking asylum or seeking refugee status, that case would have to be investigated. And I think
True, but
that
they're not
from
refugees.
Israel, that
Miri is
people,
not saying
I
they're
think
refugees.
that
She
people
knows that.
people leaving Israel is not necessarily a country that I think it would take a lot to convince somebody that you were a refugee from Israel. That being said, from Africa, in many countries in Africa, that argument can absolutely be made. And so I'd like to talk about two things. Number one, the terminology of infiltrator versus asylum seeker versus refugee versus whatever it is. I'd like to discuss, the appropriateness of using some of these terms. And second of all, you brought up sending them back to Africa and certain countries in Africa who are willing to absorb them. Are we not responsible for their well-being from a humanitarian human rights standpoint if they're coming and saying, hey, we're a refugee, and if we send them back, what happens
Allow me
there?
for a moment in that sense. I think there are two different aspects here. Listen to the discussion amongst us. What words you use, what words I use, what words others use. I teach entire courses about terminology because the terminology defines very often what we're looking at. There's no question that all of them are going to say that they're refugees. And most of them do not have what we will call a refugee status. But there's a lot of room in between that.
No, they came here to
and
work.
you immediately, because you've met them all and you know them all. I haven't, I don't know that. And when I say that, I also, having been in that sense, I was just in South Africa now, and I realized that South Africa is the place where all of the illegal ones from Central and the area of South, they go to South Africa, because that's a country where you can find a job. And they only discovered that you could walk to Israel because of our peace treaty with Egypt. They only started coming here in 2005, 6, 7. We never had this problem before. It's not going to end. It's not going to go away. They go in a boat to get to Italy and to Spain. They can try and walk and arrive here. You have to have a policy. What I'd like for once is that our policy will not just be one that looks at it through, oh my God, they're all illegal, terrorists, and they're threatening the Zionist entity. I live here. You live here. We all live here. At the end of the day, can we have a little bit of heart and not just Zionist entity and their terrorists? It's as if you have to be on the one side or on the other. And that disturbs me. It disturbs me in the way that you talk about it.
Okay.
It disturbs me in the sense that they're all rapists. And I'm like, I don't want to make those kind of generalizations about them. Just like Avihu, I don't want them to make those kind of generalizations about me. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a first world country, that I'm a democracy, that I was built on the idea of both universality and Zionism. And I want within that to approach the policy. And I'm not saying, let's give them all citizenship. That's not where I'm going.
Okay, so
I'm
let's
just
speak
asking about that basic approach that looks at them as bad and a problem and oh my God.
So let's speak about facts for a second, not about the emotions and feelings. One, since we built the barrier in the south border, they're not coming anymore to Israel, so we don't have any more illegal immigrants here. Two, there are people saying 40,000, some saying 100,000, some saying 150,000. We don't know how many there are here, and there are children.
Even Netanyahu said
and there are
was
children
capping
which are
around
born.
Yeah,
50,000.
but numbers are
children-
always easy to, because we're talking facts right now.
Yes.
Really,
And
to
there
say
are
facts
there
and
are
to say
children-
40 or
I said
100 and
there are
150,
between 40
let's
to the
make everybody
minimum
decide.
to 100 to the maximum. In between those barriers, there are children which are born on a regular day-to-day. Now you ask, do we have to take care of them? Of course we have to take care of them as long as they live here. But there's a big question. Israel is the only country for the Jewish people and a democratic country. We never expected to receive here 40,000 infiltrators. That's what they are.
Okay,
let's
so here's
let's
the deal.
not turn the word into what it's not. Now Israel has so many problems, so many enemies, so many poor people, by the way, in Israel itself.
As opposed
Now,
to every other Western country, you're
I
a
don't
member
know,
of
but
the
I'm not every
OECD.
Western country. I'm Israel.
Yes,
I'm not
but you
managing Italy, and I don't deal with the problems of Turkey at the moment.
you're
and not
acting
Spain.
right
And by the way,
now-
Spain is a very bad problem. And the countries which Muslims have immigrated into
so
are
now
in
it's
a big
about
problem
Muslims.
at the moment.
Okay,
Italy is in a big
so
problem
hold on,
as
hold on,
well.
hold on. I
Not
have
to
a
mention the
question.
fact that you said Italy received 90,000. Italy is bigger than Israel 10 times, not two times. But let's leave that because we're speaking about facts. I think that Israel, if Israel wanted to receive those people or they were refugees, I would be in a total different discussion. Those people came to work in Israel. They came illegally. When you catch an immigrant which came illegally to the country, even if he is a Jewish Israeli in Australia, I was in Australia, I was living in Australia 3 years, okay? Friends of mine who immigrated illegally, when they were caught by the Australian immigration authorities, they were sent back to Israel
So we
without
have-
such a mess
so
and
with-
big
with
noise
just
and
a
so
few-
on.
so in a
what's
few
the
words,
big
because
deal?
we're running out
Why
of
not
time.
to send them back home?
So in a few words, because we're running out of time,
Yes.
in really just a sentence or two, what do you suppose we do with them? What's the solution?
I think,
Go with
according to the
Netanyahu's
agreement that we signed with the African countries, we need to take them back to their, yes.
Colonel Eisen?
I'm disturbed by the fact that we think that we can send them not to the countries that they came from. And in that sense, the fact that
wanna
you
receive
go,
them, yeah.
what to do? We can't send them back in that sense. People who come from Sudan, we don't have relations with Sudan. People who come from Eritrea, I mean, we have challenges in that sense of what we do. I want us to keep both our heart and not just emotions, dear, but to live within the world of facts. I am proud of the fact that I live in a country that people want to immigrate to, even illegally,
And I'm
because
not
it
proud
means
of
that
it.
they,
Wait.
and I think that we take it to the extreme where we need to understand that I think that not only do they find work because there is work for them, but that 40,000 does not threaten me at all.
Moving on to our final thoughts, we really only have just about 30 seconds here. Colonel Eisen, final thoughts, silver lining, something positive to take away from our topics today.
This week, school started in Israel. Every time we go to the school system in Israel, everybody complains. I'd like to say that I'm overwhelmed. I find that my kids have good teachers, that they go in and they learn a variety of subjects, that the schools themselves are places where they study. I feel that our education system is one that we can be very proud of.
That's definitely a positive thing.
Yes, today we are in a month which we call Elul, and it's 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. I think that we're very good in taking care of other people. Let's start looking inside and find the ways of how we can take care of us, of the poor people in Israel, of the Jewish poor people who are, or Jewish or Arab, doesn't matter, who live in Israel. We need to take care of them first, then we'll start looking at the others.
So unfortunately, that is all the time we have left today for this edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly. Thank you again to all of our guests, Colonel Eisen and Avihu Sofer, for coming in, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. See you next week, and shalom from Israel.